And here we are. We are back. We're back on the live stream again. This is a spinoff, I would say, of a live stream that we I thought would be an interesting conversation to have. And I think we already have some people in the chat. I could see. See, we got Alex in the chat, Danny, of course, with the NBA references, Cophobia in there, next round video build. Hey, I like it.
Yeah, Rick Ball.
Yeah, Alex. Yep, he said hello. Um, so yeah, thanks everyone for coming through, and always appreciate that. And I was going to start out with I was going to make a spinoff of it's just the Angular show, but that one the Angular show is already
The thing.
already that was already taken. So,
Yeah.
but it's still just Angular like it implies in the title. As you can see here, I'm Brandon. I have a couple of friends with me and people in the chat. Welcome to you. So yeah, we'll get into intros and then we can get into our topic for the stream here. So yeah, so if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we can go from there. Eric, you can go first.
Oh, well, thank you, Brandon. So I'm Eric Slack. I'm here for the fun and the good vibes to chill with Brandon and Frosty here. Um, I'm from Utah. I happen to love video games, and I am an Angular GDE, and I love Angular. I host a podcast called the Angular Experience Podcast, and we go into beyond the technical. But that doesn't mean I don't like the technical. So that's why I'm here today, tuning in, just like all of you.
Cool. Glad to have you on the stream as well. Frosty, you're up.
Yep. I'm one of Brandon's lifelong friends. And he really was like, hey, I need you here. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, anything for a lifelong friend. No, yeah, I'm Aaron. I help organize NgConf. I do a lot of development. Brandon and I worked on a project. It actually ended about a year ago that we were working together.
Yep, sure did.
So we've done Angular together before. But yeah, I have a lot of unhot takes on Twitter sometimes, and I think we were talking about the name of Angular, and that's why we're here today, right? To
Hmm.
what is the new name of Angular, because it's got to be renamed with standalone components and everything. So
Yeah, I did bring up. I didn't actually mean for that tweet to be spicy at all. I was just trying to ask the question to see what, because like in Angular, like we have to associate things with names. Of course, we'll get into that, but
yeah,
it was more pinging the audience to see what they thought about it for the people that are following along. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that. But yeah, thanks for the intros there. And but yeah, this is as you can see in the title, it's still just Angular. If you haven't been following along as closely, Angular is um, Angular is introducing some new features in V14 that have been kind of discussed and talked about for a while. And those features are uh, I guess the main tagline is standalone components, pipes, and directives, which is a
yeah,
mouthful, I must say.
yeah.
Uh, so we wanted to kind of talk about like what that means in the Angular ecosystem, and feel free to, if you have any questions for those in the chat, feel free to drop those in there, and we'll try to answer some of those, or we'll pass those along. I see we got some people from the Angular team. See Pavel's out there, brand new official Google Angular team member. So
Oh yeah,
congrats,
that
yeah,
just
congrats to
happened, huh?
him. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely just recently. So,
Mm.
and I see some other friends. We got Andres in here and Dale. I see you and Josh as always. No, this is not going to be a framework debate, but we see you anyway. And I see some other people in the chat also. So yeah, shout out to y'all. But yeah, so I guess we can start off with that. If for those who don't know, if you feel free to hop in uh, on what your take on or what you've seen about what the standalone features in Angular are, and I'll leave it to whichever one of you wants to go first.
What I think the features are.
Yeah, well, yeah,
What
what
your
we know,
favorite ones are,
what we
not
know
just what
about
the
the.
features are.
Yeah, sure.
Um, I think that for me, I think it will make Angular a little bit less difficult to learn
Hmm.
because I might, and I say might like heavily because I'm still not sure how it'll play out in practicality. You might not need to understand NgModules. You might
Mm.
just have to understand some of the concepts for modules and just add them to component decorators and build an app out of it. So like I think it may take one concept out of learning Angular, which there's a lot of concepts. So I think that's a good thing personally.
Hmm.
I have a comment on that, Aaron.
Yeah.
I think not only is it a concept, it is like the concept because
Mm.
as it's pointed out in the CFP somewhere, I don't remember, and there's two now. There's two CFPs, by the way, for anyone who's following this.
RFP.
It is like we're they point out, Alex points out that it's not about components in Angular, it's actually about modules. It's the basic building block of Angular is a module at this point.
Hmm.
And they're attempting to slowly change this over to be component being the basic building block of Angular. And I'm like, so you're right. It is just one feature. It is just one less thing to learn. But I feel like it's gonna like have a domino effect. You know,
Hmm. Yeah,
I'm a little nervous actually.
I
Is anybody else
definitely,
nervous?
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I dropped the link to the first RFC in the chat there for people to take a look at. Uh, but yes, and for the people who have gone back, I know both of you are Angular OGs. So there was a time when Angular did not have ng modules, and it had a different name altogether. It was actually Angular 2 at the time.
Yeah.
And then during one of I think it was RC4 was the one before it got introduced. And ng modules have been in there from, of course, from the beginning, but not since like Angular 2 was getting ready to get towards release. But yeah, and I had the same thought also that ng modules have been central to what Angular has been like since it was released. And see, see, they're trying to bait me in the chat. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, ng modules have always been like an extra thing that I think that you had to learn in Angular to kind of get the concepts and things. And now with the RFC and effectively making them kind of optional, we get to a point where we don't have to focus on those as much, like Eric said, or at all, depending on how kind of build out your app. And I went back. I actually made a video about this also that I kind of talked about because it was big back then when the first thing discussion started happening. Because I didn't think it was part of me didn't think it was going to happen, just because of like the mental shift and everything. Um, but yeah, but what do you all think? And then we'll kind of talk about what the standalone parts are in a second. But what did you think about when you first saw the discussions happening about making ng modules optional?
Like my initial take, Brandon, was it was kind of my same take I had for Ivy, which is most people aren't going to care.
Hmm.
That was initially what I thought. I was like, dude, most people we're just going to keep writing Angular the same way. But then once it soaked in, I was like, people who are used to writing Angular with modules won't care, but new people very quickly will start to realize, hey, I don't recognize the code that Aaron wrote 2 years ago. I
Hmm.
only know the way that people write the code now. And so I pretty quickly started like, this is actually going to change. It's not going to change the way Angular works or the speed or the performance, or it's
Hmm.
not going to chill. Can you finally lazy? Like, well, you've always been able to lazy load perfectly. So it's not going to change that, but I think it will change app structure and app composition, not in like a actual meaningful performance way, but I think it will make it easier to learn. So initially, my take was way different than where I think I'm at right now.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, so I have sort of a nervous personality, and so when I saw it, I was like, "eh," and just like Aaron was doing, and then I was like, "All right, let me look at that a little bit deeper," and then I'm like, "Oh my god!" I closed the tab, and I was like, I can't deal with this right now," and I had to come back to it later and then read through it, and I'm happy. I'm happy after having read through this one. I've recently read through the second one too. I'm not worried about anything anymore, but I was
Hmm.
just like, oh my god, this is going to have sweeping changes to how I build things. You know,
Hmm.
just like Aaron said, people aren't going to recognize our code for a little bit. Now, I might be over dramatizing things, and that's just the way that I am. But I will say that it will have a big impact. It may not have a big impact right away, too.
Hmm.
An important thing to consider here is that this is laying a foundation for more work that can be done. Just like
Hmm.
there was a part two CFP, there's going to, or sorry, not CFP, RFC. There's going to be a part three RFC.
You got NgConf on the brain, CFPs.
I do, yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, the I had the I think we were pretty much aligned on the takes we had there. I thought that when I first thought about it, I was like, okay, that's cool. They're making NgModules optional in a way. I was like, they're not gonna. I didn't think they were gonna completely go away. Uh, but then when I kind of stepped back and looked at it some more, I was like, man, this is gonna. It's a small change, but it's really gonna shift how Angular apps are, like you said, built and how they are
Yeah.
constructed. I think.
Yeah.
Um, and even though the like I said, I guess we got to put the disclaimer out there. It's not. This is stuff that's coming in V14. None of the docs have changed or anything like that has changed yet. That stuff is still being worked on. So
Yeah.
it's there for you to try, but uh, still they're still working out some of those things.
And even when it's out, I doubt it will be the default CLI or NX pattern for a while. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? Like people using generators or schematics or whatever you call them, they're still gonna get NG modules at least for a while.
Yeah.
So at least for a while, maybe like all for always, but eventually, I would suspect you'll have to opt into the NG modules eventually. Like
Mm-hmm.
eventually they'll make a switch where it's like no, the CLI going forward or NX going forward, it does it as a standalone. You actually have to opt in like dash dash NG module or something like that to get it to create a module for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I started thinking that more that way, and then I read through part of the second one, and I'm like, it's getting more serious. So it's like I think they keep that disclaimer in there. Alex or whoever else contributed to this, thank you for keeping this disclaimer in there. They're
Mm-hmm.
not updating NG new, right? Yet.
Yeah.
But when they do, that's like the signal. That's the
Yeah.
bat signal that this is this
Yeah,
is this is coming.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree with that. I think that it'll be a gradual, and I think that's what the team is shooting for, like a gradual not gradual adoption, but gradual introduction of like going into schematics, into generators, and that like we said, we haven't even touched on like some of the new APIs and things yet. So, and then of course documentation's got to be there
yeah,
to like bridge the gap between. I don't want to call them new. I don't want to call them new worlds and old worlds and new worlds, but they are like different. If you take the standalone version or approach, as opposed to what comes out of the box today. So, but yeah, for like I said, for those who maybe haven't been following the RFC, and I pasted it in chat here. Yeah, what this does is the NG modules themselves. NG modules themselves, I guess we can pretty much say that those are more associated with like creating injectors, and so NG module is a way to create an injector for that like that hierarchy in Angular apps,
yeah,
and the standalone way still allows you to create those injectors. without having an ng module in front of them, and also being able to use like component. We talked about components, pipes, and directives in the components themselves, which is different in a way because it's a lot more granular now. And I think we've kind of moved in that direction like over time also. When we initially we had like large barrels of single modules that had a bunch of things in them, like Angular material used to be like that, where everything was like when you imported the material module and you got like everything if you needed it. But they gradually moved away to more granular imports, and now you can kind of pick and choose the pieces that you want and in your components that you would use for Angular material, even other libraries like that. And this seems kind of like the next evolution of that, actually baking that into the framework to where your components, pipes, and directives can just bring in the things that they need and not have to go through that the middleman, I would say, of using an ng module.
Usually
So
module.
yeah.
I feel like people like you, Brandon, library authors, are still probably going to rely on them heavily, don't you think? Like, as I try and
I
bring in NGRX, there's just some
mhm,
config that I feel like I need that for
mhm.
recall and stuff. So I feel like it's still going to be around for certain users.
I think so also. For well, okay, I have two takes. I do have a take on this. Me
Okay.
personally, I would like to see us introduce, because the team has introduced some new APIs to where we can use things like NGRX, but just have them in the providers, or have them in the providers of the environment. And that's something we haven't necessarily talked about directly, but
Okay.
and that way we could just have things like provide store or configure store, that sort of thing. So part of me wants to see library authors, including uh, NGRX, to take advantage of some of those new APIs. So we're not just like wrapping ng modules um, and saying that we're doing it the new way. But
Right.
the other side is, see, y'all trolling me in the chat. The other side is that we take the existing API or the new APIs that kind of wrap the module patterns and provide those. So I think there's a balance to be had there. But I would like to see, like, NGRX is a bunch of providers, right?
Yeah.
So we wouldn't necessarily need to have an ng module to do that, like bootstrapping and initialization anymore. So I think we can experiment with trying to see what those APIs look like.
Yeah.
Another thing that modules are doing for us is routing, right? And
Hmm.
so, injection is a big part of it, and routing is another big part. And I feel like a lot of things such as NGRX can sort of look at the way that we're doing routing now and sort of learn from that. And two
Hmm.
of the things that you mentioned, they were the technical things like configure, and some other things. It's like those things are also part of the way that routing structure is going to be going
Hmm.
forward. Now having a module with routes in it is still a little bit mind blowing to me, but it makes sense. I mean, if you go all the way back to Angular 3, totally kidding, Angular 2. Um,
Well, Angular 3, what? What? No, go ahead.
there is an Angular 3 JS, but there's no Angular 3. But
Hmm.
Angular 2, we were able to do a lot of things with the components back then, with injection and things like that. And components were kind of like these giant, massive files that were very confusing. Man, when they switched to Angular 4 and I didn't have that anymore, I was very confused. I was like, what happened? This is like a completely different library for a minute.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think they're going to do that to us in this case. Like you said, it's gradual. But anyway, yeah, I think we can copy routing when it comes to things such as state management in some ways.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we talked about with with the with kind of touched on with the environment injector. And I see we do have some questions in the chat that some good ones that we'll get to also with optional ng module. So feel free to keep dropping those in there, and we'll definitely get to those too. Um, but yeah, and I think that's one good thing about how the team is approaching introducing these is that even if you don't have NG modules, you still have a place to put things. And like you said, the routing, introducing like the providers into the route config is a way that you still have a place to put things like store module for feature, and when you're like lazy loading providers and those things that you would normally have an NG module for. So yeah, I think there will definitely be, or they're actively looking at, like I said, ways to make that make the make people comfortable. Eric keeps saying he was nervous, been nervous about it, and sees it that way. So I think that will definitely be in the on the minds of the team as far as what a good experience is in that way. And we can definitely, if you see any questions, Eric or Frosty, in the chat that we want to kind of talk to while we're going through here, feel free to point those out. And I say pointed one of those out earlier, so I'll bring it up here. One of them was, if modules become optional, will things like test bed be changing to accommodate that? I don't know if anyone of you had a take on that or not.
I just have to say that's a super awesome question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see how they could stay the same, personally.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. I have a guess, like most things in life.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing, Brandon, you have a better answer than me.
I think they will. I don't if because today you use test bed. Well, aside from the test bed haters like Josh in the chat, I just had to throw that out there.
You got to punch down once in a while, man.
There you
Get
go.
that in line.
But yeah, test bed today is like you configure a testing module when you want to set that up for tests. So I think in a world with just standalone components, I have to say it every time: standalone components, pipes, and directives. That's why I want to call it something. That's why I want to call it something else. I mean, the show is still just Angular, but definitely get that urge to call it something. But when you're testing those things, I think we still want the test bed to accommodate the world with standalone components. I'm just going to use standalone components, and we'll tack on the rest of the stuff for brevity's sake.
Yeah. Good call. I think that testing's like a place where you go to really all the good practice that you like. Hey, I'm gonna be a good developer as I write my code. I feel like testing is where you go to just be like, this is where no one's ever gonna read this, so I can do whatever. So I feel like NgModules may continue to exist like in abundance inside tests, because they do let you provide stuff in a less than expected way. So I do think it's a great. I think I would expect that they'll be in testing more than they'll be in the actual coding. So
Just for simplicity's sake, Aaron, since that's
yeah,
what everybody knows.
yeah, just to fake out the system. Yeah, just to provide something that, like the NGRX store, it's real easy to provide that and say, hey, that whatever's getting injected in this component, it's this thing instead. It's a lot easier, And so like, so I think it maybe continue to be in tests, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think Angular itself has always been about patterns and providing like guidance on areas like testing and providing kind of structure for that. So yeah, I think I don't think, of course, test bed is not going away. So yeah, but there is some opportunity there to make that easier, or even introduce like I said, some of these APIs are just going to be, some of the things that they're introducing are just new, and I'm not sure how much the test bed has been like openly discussed. So I think there's still definitely some room for conversation there, I think.
Alex is just sitting there going, "Hey, if they only knew."
Right. They probably had a meeting, or have a meeting today to discuss some of these things, and they're just going to drop the new RFC on us soon about what the testing story is like, and we're going to be like, y'all were already like way past what we were thinking about, which is great. So that they're thinking about those things already.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the one thing, like we said, we talked about the routing and I think the thing that's a little, I don't want to say a bit mysterious, but the thing that is kind of behind, I think, how the NG modules became optional with this RFC. You see, I see Alex in the chat there. See, we got you on screen now. He's, they already know what's going on. Um, but yeah, as far as the routing goes, and it kind of goes back to injectors, is I think the idea of this new environment injector, and that's seems to be like uncovering what NG modules used to provide. The used to be, or it was a module injector, but now they've kind of introduced this environment injector, and I've talked about that before of kind of like providing those new APIs to let us kind of hook into some of those things that we were doing with NG modules. I can just use NGRX as an example because we used the NG modules in NGRX um, to NGRX to kind of bootstrap some of the initialization of store and things. So, and then that the injector or environment injector gives us a place to do that with just providers themselves. So, as we mentioned about that, we can that'll be another thing we can get into there. So, yeah, let's see what we got here. Okay, I think we're about half. Well, I want to say we're
About
about
half
halfway through.
point.
Yeah, about half point. So, and yeah, we'll bring up the RFC here in a minute. Um,
I'd
and
like to understand more about what you were just talking about with routing. I don't personally see how the routing changes much. Can you explain to me how it changes? Other than the routes probably have to go into the standalone component, but can you kind of walk me through that?
yeah, sure. Let's see. And I'll bring up the maybe the second RFC probably will help that also. Yep. Thanks. See if somebody help me out there, dropping a link in the chat or dropping a link there. Um, so bring that up here in a second if this thing will let me share. No, Chrome is always uh, fickle
Always
about
taking
this.
away your screen share permission. Yeah.
Yes, we'll see if it cooperates. And of course, it's giving me prompts about that. So later, we'll see if it lets me do it anyway. Chrome tab. And okay, I don't think it was that one. So let's try this again. Share screen. Chrome tab. Maybe this one. Not going again. Okay. One more time and then we're gonna get it correct this time. Because it's start showing me the right.
If you want, I can put my monitor up to my camera.
No, we don't. I think we'll. I think we'll be okay.
Hold your
Uh,
phone with the YouTube stream on it up to it. It'll be
there we go. I think that will work here. Let's try. All right, we're gonna try it one more time. Okay, now it says that Google Chrome has lost my ability to share. So that's great.
no,
So
super cool.
super cool.
Super cool.
Okay, we'll drop the link in the chat here, and
It's just
but
conversation material for the next Google I/O that you attend.
Right.
oh, there you go.
Hey, Chrome
Um,
team.
yes, Chrome team. Thanks. And I'll keep trying it while we talk here. But yes, on the routing front, the thing that is I think it's different in a couple of ways because there aren't NG modules there now. They there's a new API to just let you lazy load in a couple of ways where you can just lazy load a component itself without having to have any routes like
Routes on it.
any further. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you can just do like the dynamic import and lazy load a route component directly that way, which is cool. And one thing that I was looking at a while back when I was in my one of my mini router building escapades. Uh, so there's that.
You are the
And
router guy at this point.
hey, what can I say?
Yeah.
I like the dynamics of routers and things
Yeah.
there. So yeah, sorry, just dropped some in the chat. Um, yeah, so that's one part of it. The other part of it is that you can lazy load an array of routes now directly, and then those routes can lead to standalone components, which is another thing that uh, I think is pretty valuable in like I said, not having the module there in between, but we still have those that ability to lazy load routes in that way. And one thing that, and I think they mentioned this also, is that now you could see, I could see a place where you could have your whole route config just be loaded up front, even if everything's lazy loaded, because you're not like paying that penalty of
Yeah.
having everything bundled up in that way because of the route config.
Yeah.
And you can still do this dynamic routing, dynamic components, and which is a big deal to me. I love lazy loading anything I ever want to, when I want to, and so that's also part of the CFP. When I used to like lazy load like a dialogue component or something like that, I'd be like, I have to include the component and a module in this, if just so I can dynamically load this, and it makes complete sense because that's the basic building block of Angular, but it's not going to be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you can just have components for your lazy loaded things. And yeah, so Danny in the chat, he's also interested in this. I gotta say, I have to run and pick up my son from kindergarten. He'd be very sad if Daddy doesn't show up. But
yes,
I love you all. I love this conversation, and thank you for inviting me, Brandon.
Yeah,
enjoy, everyone. I'll catch up later.
Cheers, Eric.
That's it. All right. And then there were two. I would do this if someone in the chat wants to come on and you have your mic and stuff ready, send me a DM and we'll see if we can bring you on. How about that? We'll try to make it happen. But yes, so yeah, we talked about routing, and dynamic components was another thing there. And somebody did ask a good question in the chat here, if I can find it here. So I think it's a question worth asking. Are standalone components sharing the same life cycle as a normal component?
Normal, come on, man.
Yeah,
now
like
we're
I
calling
so
it normal.
said,
Yeah.
they're normal and they're still components. We're like I said, we're saying it's just still just Angular at the end of the day. So, but yeah, to answer that question, somebody in the chat already answered it. Everything is a component. Standalone components are just components. Non-standalone components are just components. So, so yes, though none of what Angular that you know today will change as far as components, pipes, and directives, as far as those life cycles and things.
So let me ask another question. Thanks for that answer for Venancio. So Brandon, I expected to be able to lazy load a component by itself. Like I expected to be able to say route foo load this component. So that's working. I can also lazy load a file that has an array of lazy loaded routes. It sounds like, and so I can lazy load a bunch of standalone components too. So like I can lazy load one, and I can lazy load more than one, it looks like. Let me ask you this. Can I have new routes registered in my standalone components that are lazy loaded?
Interesting.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like parameterized routes for the admin section or something. Like, can I have a nested route in my standalone component?
Okay, so this is where there are some limitations, I think, around, well, I don't want to say limitations around standalone components, but limitations around not limitations, design decisions around the injectors. Let's put it that way.
Bro, I just watched you do like some like Neo Matrix.
Yeah, so
Good
I did
job.
some mental gymnastics on that one. Yes.
Yeah, good job.
You can provide routes in a standalone component providers, but they won't register new routes, as
Yeah.
far as I understand. And that's mainly because of how the environment injectors work. So the environment injector has a hierarchy, and then there's like the component injector hierarchy, right? Uh, and in order for the routes to be registered, they would have to be on an environment injector, and that's usually where you put them in the route config. So they can't go in the route component directly themselves, but they can go in in the route config in the providers area, and those would work. So there are some subtle differences in how those two things operate that I know that the team is aware of.
Do you think they'll make fixes for that, or do you think that'll be a scenario? Because I'm expecting one or two things that creep out as always in edge case from
Mm-hmm.
NgModule. Do you think that might be like one of those long-lived um, NgModule lazy load things, or what do you think?
Uh, yes, I think that will be an ongoing uh, issue. I don't
Okay.
want to call it issue, but an ongoing subject of discussion.
An
Uh,
ongoing thing that people have to work through as part
yeah,
of the design decisions.
yeah, and then part of that I think will help with, of course, documentation and stuff will help with that. But people are going to be uh, people will see providers and they'll just think, oh, I can just drop my router providers in there,
Yeah.
and it'll pick those up. And then if it doesn't, then you have to kind of go back and figure out what that's about. So I think
Right.
that is one of those areas that will have to be cleared up in documentation and things. Because I've done some tinkering around with the setup also, and that was one of the things that I ran into because I wanted it. Mentally, I wanted it to work one way, and it kind of ended up working a different way. So, as far as the providers go, okay, we have a we have a surprise guest. I'm going to bring him up
All
here.
right.
Lars, hey, what's up?
Hey, Lars is here.
How are you?
Hi there.
Yeah, we initially had you on, then we had some schedule things to work through, but yeah, it seems like you were able to come on. So thanks for coming on. Anyway, and I'm going to assume that you've maybe been hearing some of the chat here. We were talking about using routing providers in the components or routes, configuring routes in the components, the component providers themselves. But we can take a step back. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first, and then we can kind of continue the discussion from there.
That's quite a mouthful. Configuring
Yes.
route configuration in the providers and whatnot. No, I didn't hear anything. I just got back from my daughter's
Okay.
football match, and
We
so I
got
wanted
one.
to see if you're still here.
We got one person going to pick theirs up, and then one person coming from
Right.
getting there. So
Yeah.
it's a circle.
So yeah, I'm Lars Brink. I've been looking into optional NgModules and scams and standalone components for 3 years or more. So I'm very excited to see them like just around the corner now. Any day, right? Any day now.
Yeah, we've been getting closer and closer to having something we can actually install and tinker with. Um, so yeah, we were talking about the routing piece of it, but we'll circle back. And if you wanted to kind of give you, like you said, you've been working with it for a while. And what was your initial take when you saw like the discussions happening about optional NG modules? And then we can kind of talk about how that like impacts Angular and kind of continue the conversation from there.
You mean this year or
Yeah,
2018?
no, this year. We know you were on the horn about them back then, but now that we're at a place where we can actually see something
Yeah.
and build something with that, what is your initial impressions?
I was very happy with how the initial, just the component API itself, how that turned out, and with the interoperability with NgModules and the imports keyword. I mean, yeah, that was very good. And I know they're doing rounds with some of you Angular GDs and the Angular team before they open up the RFC to the public. So I think they sorted out a lot of different difficult things before then. So it was very good by the time it was in public RFC.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I think we talked about some of that earlier, but for us to, people are wondering if you're just really relaxed today or not. But he's letting you know what's happening there. So we're gonna keep it rolling. So yeah, we kind of talked about like I said, what that initial impressions, what that kind of means for Angular going forward, and we'll go with we can look at a couple of questions, but I did have one. Is if you think, and both of you are feel free to answer, if you think that NgModules ever completely go away for Angular applications in practice or in reality. And Frosty, we'll let you go first on this one.
Certainly from legacy app, and by legacy, I'm using a loaded word. I'm
Yes.
basically talking about the app you're writing today. Any Angular app that has NgModules, unless the API gets deprecated, which I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone doing refactoring for the sake of it. I do see people going, hey, from here on out, we use standalone components pattern. Everything the old way was the old way. So I think practically will be around a long time. But additionally, I think even on new projects, Brandon, I've dug to the deep pits of Stack Overflow sometimes, right? And when you're looking through 17 different commits on the Angular team to try and figure out how you need to write your code because the documentation doesn't cut it. Sometimes I feel like there may be an NgModule that will just save the day. Just something about that for root syntax isn't going to be able to be replaced. So I wonder, to be honest, if I would guess they'll always be around, at least for advanced users. So,
Lars, what say you?
Well, I see people have been sort of preparing for them for a while with scams. So even NX has a scam generator now, right? There was a few before that by the community as well. And even the Angular team in one of the RCs talked about providing an official migration schematic from scams to standalone components. But of course, that doesn't mean that everyone will migrate away from NgModules or that they will go away, but it sounds like they're going to focus more on the module-free approach in things like documentation. So that will certainly lead people to that direction when they come to Angular as new developers or new Angular developers. So they might not even have to learn about much at all about NgModules. So I think, or I hope, there's a chance that we'll see less and less NgModules. And I totally agree that components depending on NgModules should now be considered legacy as soon as standalone components are available.
Well, we don't want to use the term legacy because I think that has the opportunity to cause a lot of confusion about is Angular legacy now, or what is this new way is my so I'm already confused talking about it. So
Brandon
I think
wants
we
us
have
to
to
call
be
it module boilerplate.
Oh my God.
Because
All right.
you don't need it.
Where's the mute button? I am the host, so I do have that control.
So the way I see it, it's similar to React. They've had quite a few component APIs, and it took years, if ever, they removed any of those. So anyone knew that, well, now the new thing's here, why would I use the old thing, right? So by de facto, they are legacy if you created components using the old React APIs. Anyone would like to use the new ones, and today we have hooks and functional pure components and things like that in React. And I think it's a similar thing here, that standalone components will be the go-to pattern.
Mhm. Yeah,
So, so
I
that's
kind of
my
drew that
reason.
same conclusion as far as um, thinking about how React introduced hooks and class components are still there. They're still a thing. People
Yep.
still use them, but hooks are considered like the standard now,
Yeah.
and class components are the escape hatch, if you will. That you use those if you have to, but hooks are like the recommended approach for there. So I think that we'll end up something similar to that with Angular apps. I don't think that I'll go out on the limb and say I don't think that Angular apps of today should be migrated to use the standalone approach. Unless you have like you've been using the scan pattern and you already have like all that infrastructure in place and you can kind of migrate your code base
Yeah.
automatically, I don't think it's worth the effort to go and do that with existing large apps today. Now, new apps going forward, this is after V14 gets released and like going forward, I think there's opportunity there to say, hey, we can try to start with what start in the world with standalone features and then see how far because everything else will remain the same, right? All things equal, you should be able to build the same applications just using a different pattern. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm hoping for in the short term, that we just use these for new things and try to figure out the right patterns to recommend to the community and things.
If if and Brandon, you may have been on a really large project together. If
Hmm.
someone could show either in Angular 14 or in some future release that the AOT is dramatically improved, like the time, the rebuild time for either testing or for builds
Hmm.
without NgModules, and I don't think that's the case day one. I don't think it's the focus either. But if if one day there was a huge build time perf
Hmm.
for either tests or for the build itself, I could see people going, and we're big. We have to do this investment. But I don't
Yeah.
think most people are going to. And until that happens, and that was a hypothetical, that no one ever like someone smart like Lars will probably be like, "Hey, I did a test. It's like negligible if you remove it." So,
Hmm.
um, and then we all go, "Cool, I won't worry about it." But there's a hypothetical future where someone goes, "Hey, it's way faster," and on that day, I could see some people moving away. But I don't think generally. I'm generally agreeing with what you two are saying.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, there's opportunity there, but I think we ought to ease into it. Well, I think of course companies with large code bases are going to be like, "Hey, that's cool. We're not doing that. We're not doing that right
Yeah,
now. We have an existing code base with X number of developers on it that we're not going to like spend the time to basically try to train them on this new thing. We'll save that for evergreen projects and move forward from there."
Alex just dropped a note in the chat, kind of like,
Ah, I see. He said it
yeah,
will be negligible. Standalone components won't move the performance needle with current compiler architecture.
yeah.
And he says it does open up some interesting possibilities for the future there, though.
Hmm.
Mm. So
Okay.
we
It
got some
wasn't a
code.
no.
We
It
got some
wasn't a no.
code. Right.
Yeah.
Alex is the compiler, one of the compiler people on the Angular team, so he would know um, where things are and where they could go. So that's definitely some interesting insights there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are getting close to a close. So, but we do want to, if you see any questions in the chat there, feel free to drop those or point those out, and we'll try to answer some of those, and then we'll kind of wrap up here. And then we'll, of course, we'll pass those questions along after this is over for
Could I
that.
ask
So
some questions? Like, I
yeah,
just want
sure.
to invite some questions. Like, because Eric said something I think is probably pretty common, where
Hmm.
he kind of got nervous. I don't think people like having the cheese moved. Like, we like to kind of go through the
Yeah.
rat race, and everything's in the same place on the race every day. Is anyone listening like? Do you have a concern, or is there some angst you're feeling as we talk through this stuff? Like, if there is, maybe it's something none of us have thought about. Please ask it, or like maybe it's something that that someone here could share an answer with. And like Alex is in the chat, so yeah. Just wanted to invite any sort of like nervous questions.
Yeah, definitely. There was, I'll bring this up here now because I thought that one was right on time. Was Michael said actually likes NgModules, can do, could really do with an actual reference application using standalone before it understands how they work at scale. So, and
Yeah.
I've kind of heard that, I've heard that across, this is not the first time I've heard that either, is people actually like the organization that NgModules provide, and they would rather keep that as like a way to organize their Angular apps, even with like the perceived like mental overhead of that. So
Yeah.
I know we.
Well, here's the thing: you don't need an ng module to have like a collection of declarables. You can just have an array, and people can add that to the imports array of their standalone components. So really, as the way I see it is, it's less boilerplate.
There we go. I like it. But yeah, I agree. And like I said, some of those things are going to happen, I think, over time, even at like library author level. To where do we get to? Do we get to a point where library authors just export standalone components and the rest of the things, as I'll call them? Yeah, go ahead, Frosty.
I was just gonna confirm I understood what Lars had just said. So Lars, what you're saying, if I'm wrong, say it. The meta that's on an ng module that helps organize code, we're essentially just going to move that meta down onto the component, right? To the standalone component. So like it provides the same ability, the standalone component, as the ng module is what I heard you say, but maybe I misunderstood what you said.
Yeah, well, there's of course always nuances. Like there's the linking the declarables, like the pipes, components, and the directives, and that will happen in the imports array now on the standalone components rather than in the imports array on the module wrapping the component or declaring the component. And then so that's one side. The other important side is providers. So components have always had this providers array and even a view providers array, and but that's about the, is it called the element injector or the node injector?
Yeah,
But
element
that's
node
different
injector, yeah.
from what has until now or until very recently been called the module injectors, but now they're called environment injectors. So and we'll start to see like differentiating between those terms more now, because if you slap the providers onto a component, it's different from when it was in a module. And that can actually be a benefit, but it can also like cause some confusion. I see it as a big benefit of, for example, the NGX component store, that we can tie these services to the lifecycle of a component, but we could also choose to provide it at like a root provider scope, which is more similar to the NGX global store, because that has always been at the module injector level.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. And and we kind of talked some about that earlier about the module injector versus like this new. I don't want to call it new, but the environment injector kind of takes the place of the module injector, so that we still have the two hierarchies for how you can do dependency injection. You still have the component or element or node injector there, and then the module or the environment injector kind of above that. So, but yes. So yeah, we'll take a couple more questions, and then I think we'll wrap up from there. I was trying to scan through here because I know there's someone asked one earlier, and then we have some people who dropped some there. This
There's
is
a lot of good explanations down there. Yeah.
Yeah, will some modules not be allowed to be optional? Provide, for example, hybrid.module in a hybrid application. Can that be converted to this standalone thing? Yeah, and in those, I would say, and feel free to jump in. I would say in those cases, it depends on how you can still consume those modules in your Angular application today, because it's fully like backward compatible in that way. So A module, NgModule today works with a standalone component the same way. You could reorganize that some to where you just have the standalone versions of those things and not have to have them made available through the module. But uh, there's nothing that's going to break what you're currently doing today by the introduction of standalone components and the rest. I think that's
Yeah.
definitely worth saying that this is an addition, not a change to the existing way for now.
Yeah, hybrid apps, hybrid modules, which is kind of his point. A hybrid module is going to always, without very specific care, it's
Mm-hmm.
always going to have a trouble being lazy loaded.
Mm-hmm.
But you can lazy load a hybrid module. It's totally possible, but you do have to stare at it and you have to intentionally do it. You don't get it for free. Like, so if you're currently lazy loading your hybrid modules, you're gonna be fine. If you're currently not lazy loading your hybrid modules and you'd like to, that's not even really related to this conversation with standalone components at all. So
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see any. This is a one. Well, I guess we'll take this as the last one. Will Angular still throw an error if you try to register a component with the same selector? And my answer to that would be yes. The every like all the things about Angular, and then we can kind of end cap on this. All the things about Angular that you know today are still the same. It's still just Angular today. If you got an error on something you were doing Angular that you weren't that before with the introduction of standalone, you're still going to get that same error as far as collisions and all those other things. Um, this is just meant as a way to lessen the usage or even eliminate, like I said, eliminate the usage of ng modules, but still retain that functionality that they provide there. So, um,
yeah.
did you all want to add anything else, or if you want to, if you have any upcoming links or things, if you want to talk about that, and then we'll wrap this one up uh, for this conversation about Angular and the with the new standalone. I call it Angular with the new standalone features, but I'm hoping we'll have some kind of something more concrete to call it. But like you said, it's just Angular, and then we can tack on the rest of the stuff.
Yeah. No, I just want to thank you for putting this together. It was fun. As I feel like I have to do this. Brandon's really smart and he's fun to hang out with. And there's a lot of people like Brandon in the Angular community that are going to be at NgConf in a few months. And anyone watching, if you're not coming to
Yes.
NgConf yet, I just want to invite you to, hey, consider coming to NgConf. It's going to be a blast this year.
Yes.
All this stuff will be main stage, front and center, releasable, testable, usable. So come learn about it with us.
Yep, I dropped a link to NgConf in the chat there. I mean, where this show is about discussing Angular, so and NgConf is the Angular conference we all want to be at. So we gotta plug that in there, and completely fine with that. Lars, did you have anything that you wanted to drop in there?
No, I think I'm kind of done with standalone components. I'm happy they're here.
All
almost.
right, we have
but,
successfully beaten Lars into submission with
We did it.
standalone components.
No, I'm just happy, and I see like everything in that second RC is. I think I identified most of those exact points that need to be addressed in an article 3 years ago. So I'm happy to see the Angular team will be taking care of all of this. Like I didn't expect that we would see the actual standalone components and the related module-free APIs around the same time. So I'm very happy to be seeing that. I see a lot of activity in the community about articles, videos about standalone components. One that stands out is Manfred Steyer has written some recent content about it. So go check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, I think he just dropped an article today. Well, maybe not today, but I know he's been doing articles and things about that already. So I'll find that link and drop it in the show notes so people can find that also.
I think the other thing is standalone components will allow Angular to finally be about components in the sense that they will be the lowest compilation unit, not an NgModule that contains a component. Now you can actually use a directive, a component, a pipe as one compiled unit. And the way it's supposed to be in my in my perspective.
I heard React people talk about that for a long time. React's just components and blah blah blah. I'm like, it's not really though. Once you add everything else, Angular can get a little bit of that love of it's just components with some stuff on top, like which I think is good. I think we needed some of that, so I agree with you.
Yeah.
But so the interesting thing is, where's the future? Like, will we see things like code splitting on the event level, for example? We'll see things like you have been doing some component router things, Brandon, and you did it years ago. Aaron as well, the lazy loader thingy.
Oh, you mean I get to plug my Angular component router, which I gave a talk on at NgConf. Another plug there.
Yep.
And then we had a project for that. Yes, this was part of where I wanted to go, was getting back to Angular just being about the front part is just being about components, and that be the primary thing that we can work around. So we're getting there, and I think is putting us on that path. Yeah, it's happening, and I'm glad to see it. So I'll have to revisit my project now to see what we can do about that. So
check it out. Look at your domain names. I'm sure you got some domain names you bought for some project you could spend.
Of course. Well, not just me. I'm always thinking of stuff like that to do. So it's just more a matter of time and resources to do it. So. But yeah, I think that's a good place to button this one up. Aaron, Frosty, thank you for coming on and taking in the discussion. Eric, who came at the beginning and had to do the daddy thing, so we appreciate him for coming through also. And Lars, who came in through the second half there, thank you for coming through and dropping insight as always. And thanks for everyone in the chat who came through, dropped some great questions. And I'm sure we'll continue the conversation going forward. And like I said, I'm looking forward to more content and videos and everything else coming about it. So we can keep moving forward. So yeah, with that, we will say, see ya.
See everyone.